Oi.
Oi, Miguel, tudo bom? Também entrei mais cedo para testar aqui se estava tudo direitinho. Ah, então tá. Eu vou. Eu tô. Deixa eu ver se o vídeo está funcionando. Só minha cabecinha, né? Tá escuro, né? Agora clareou.
Tudo
Bem com você?
bem. O áudio tá bom? A qualidade do.
Tá ótimo. Então tá bom. Eu vou até ficar na sala, mas eu vou parar o vídeo e mutar, tá bom?
Tá bom.
Então tá. Até daqui a pouco.
Até mais. Hello, 1, 2, 3.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Great.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonjour Miguel, tu m'entends bien?
Oui,
Ok,
tu m'entends.
super. Tu partages tes slides? Ah oui, mais c'est déjà le cas, pardon. Je focalisais sur l'image derrière, pardon.
Hello, Lolita.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, hi all.
Je passe juste un petit peu, c'est qui? Il y a tout Kouliba. Ah, il y a Patricia aussi. Bonjour Patricia.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Et après, vu qu'on a tout la facilité, c'est juste OK. C'était qui était et après, je fais juste un
So just more 5 minutes, they'll be here.
Hello, I'm Nadia Brauner. I think I will be president of a jury. Yeah, this is a very nice jury with only women. Yeah. The director is a man, but one of the supervisors is a man. Hello. Hello, Lucia.
Hello, hello, how are you?
Bonjour, Jolita. Bonjour, Patricia.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Sorry, we are a little bit late in France. The member of a jury who are in the room eat in a very good restaurant just before. Can we tell that? And the restaurant was a little bit very good, but a little bit long. And we're waiting for Grégory and we start.
Okay.
So you can all hear me? Yes? Okay, so we will start the defense of Miguel, so your name, Vasconcelos. And no, stay, it's okay. And before starting, maybe I will present the members of the jury. So I will take them in the order on my paper. Anne-Cécile Orgerie, who is directrice de recherche au CNRS Bretagne et Pays de la Loire. Vous êtes derrière. Who is examinator of work. Patricia Pascal Stoll, professeur des universités à l'université Paris-Toulouse Paul Sabatier, who was a reviewer of your work.
Hello.
Hello, Patricia. Julita Corbalan Gonzalez, who is associate professor in Barcelona, who was also a reviewer of your work. Hello, Julita. Myself, Nadia Brauner, professeur des universités here in Grenoble, who is examinator. Lucia Maria de Assumpção Drummond, who is full professor at Universidade Federal Fluminense. Yeah, I can see you also. And your supervisors, Fanny Dufossé, chargée de recherche in RIA à Grenoble, and Daniel De Angelis Cordero, who is coming from Sao Paulo. Thank you. So I'll let you know. Can they see your slide? It's okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the members of the jury for accepting reviewing my thesis. So today I'm going to present my defense. The title of my thesis is Strategies for Operating and Sizing Low Carbon Cloud Data Centers. And this thesis was a co-tutela between University of Grenoble Alpes and University of São Paulo. And my advisors are Farida Fossé and Daniel Cordeiro. So let's start. So cloud computing became one of a key component of our modern society because it provides computational resources for most of services and applications we use. But the problem is that the data centers have a massive power consumption. Nowadays, they consume around 1% of the whole electricity that is produced in the world. And this could even be used to power some entire countries. In the left, we have what modern cloud platforms looks like. We have data centers distributed all over the world for many reasons. For example, to reduce the response time for the users, and also for availability reasons. If a region goes down, other regions can receive the workload. But not all these regions have access to low carbon intensive sources. As we can see in the second figure, from the electricity map, the services that show how renewable, how green is the energy produced at its location. So green is more renewable power, and brown is more carbon intensive. And therefore, all this energy consumption results in high carbon emissions. And many efforts are being doing both by industry and the scientific community to reduce this environmental impact. For example, renewable energy is already present in the operation of data centers. Google reported that last year, for the whole electricity that was consumed, in average, 64% came from renewable energy. And there's another remarkable example is the improvements in efficiency from 2010 to 2018. The cloud workload increased 6 times, but the energy consumption only 6%, thanks to new servers that become more power efficient, and also improvements in virtualization technology that allow to consolidate more tasks in a few number of servers. But electricity is not the single source for carbon footprint. The greenhouse gas protocol was created to measure the carbon footprint of the industry, and it also classifies another 2 scopes. The first is the direct GHG emissions. In the data centers, one type of emission that is included in the scope is the gases used for cooling. And the third scope is the other indirect GHG emissions. It also includes manufacturing the servers and the data center infrastructure. And with the including renewable energy in the operation of data centers, now the emissions are shifting for the third scopes. For example, Google reported that last year, 74% of all its emissions came from the third scope. And given this context, in my thesis, I explored strategies for operating and sizing low carbon cloud data centers. They are low carbon considered the 3 scopes, and we use the CO2 equivalent metric to measure their carbon environmental impact. And what is this metric? So this metric is used to compare different greenhouse gases based in their global warming potential. So that's R134 is a gas that is used for cooling the data centers. So it has a global warming potential of over 1,000, and therefore emitting 1 gram of it is equal to emitting more than 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. And which strategies? I explored carbon responsive strategies. So these are strategies that are aware of the carbon footprint and use this information to make decisions to reduce the environmental impact. In particular, they follow the renewables and sizing the renewable and IT infrastructure. In terms of the main contributions of my thesis, the first was analysis of the impact of follow the renewables, both in the energy and network congestion. And the second was a modeling for sizing and operating the data centers, and for the sizing both the renewable and the IT infrastructure. And this modeling uses a linear program formulation. So now I will start presenting about each of these contributions. So the first contribution, the analysis of the impact of the follow the renewables. So first, what is follow the renewables? So these strategies, the main idea of the strategy is that you have the information of the renewable energy and you try to allocate the workload to use more of this renewable energy. And as the renewable energy changes over time, you can migrate your workload to follow the availability of renewable energy. That's where the name comes from, so follow the renewables. So here in this figure, I have an example of data centers that are distributed all over the world. These are the circles. And these data centers can be supplied by power from solar panels. And the size of the circle represents the power consumption that is related to the workload being executed. A bigger circle means that more workload is being executed in the data center. We can clearly see that most of the workload is being executed in the data centers where the sun shines, because they are producing solar power. Okay, but this strategy is not free. It involves it uses the network, and it also needs computational tasks that it results in power consumption. So I study what is the impact in this strategy, both network and in the energy. And to start, first I looked at how this strategy is implemented in the literature, how is the state of the art. So I found these algorithms, and here I'm comparing them in how they adapt to this strategy. So the first step, the first column allocation is that if the algorithms use the information for the renewable energy to allocate the initial workload, so the workload that the user sends. So how this studies uses. So for the second column, migration is when the renewable energy availability changes. Thus, the algorithm migrates the workloads to be sent to the data centers where you have more information, more renewable energy. So you see that with exception of the WSNB, all these studies perform the migration. And the final column is regarding the information of the network. Thus, the migration considers the information of the network to plan these migrations. We see that only the first algorithm adapts this, considers the network. Okay, but in practice, how this impacts the energy consumption? To investigate these different adoptions of follow the renewables, I performed computational experiments. And to develop these experiments, I used the SIMGRID framework, because SIMGRID permits to simulate large-scale distributed systems. And it's well validated by the scientific community, and it has accurate models for both power consumption and network. For the power consumption, we used the linear model based on the usage of the SIMGRID framework. And we also model that when you perform a migration, one CPU core is used in the target host during the time of the migration. In terms of the cloud infrastructure, it's based on a real example. So it's based on the Grid 5000 infrastructure. So here, okay, this figure is a representation of how these data centers are interconnected in the network. So you see in the center the links that interconnect multiple data centers. So a bad migration planning will result in congestion, especially in these links. In terms of the network, the bandwidth of inside each data center is 1 gigabit, and between the different data centers is 10 gigabits. And for the renewable energy traces, we use input based on the photovoltaic project. So the simulations had the duration of 1 week, and for each week it was selected a different trace from the photovoltaic project. Regarding the workload, they are virtual machines. They are considered to be CPU intensive. So the CPU is used 100% of the time during its duration. And it's based on real traces from real cloud providers as Google and Azure. And these traces do not provide information for the network. So the only usage in the network is by the live migrations that will be performed. Okay, so in terms of the results in energy consumption, so what we are interested is the non-renewable energy consumption. So because it's the carbon intensity, we want to reduce the non-renewable energy consumption to minimize the environmental impact. We see that the first algorithm is performed best among the other algorithms. So it uses the follow renewable both for the allocation, it migrates the workload, and it also considers the network for the migration. The second and third algorithm, they perform migration as well, but they do not take into account the network. And finally, the last algorithm, it's the one that does not perform the migration. So it's only allocates the workload to the different data centers, the initial workload. Okay, so the less performing the worst because the workload remained executing even if the renewable energy was not available anymore where the workload started executing. So now we are interested to investigate, okay, but for the second and the third algorithms, what was really the impact of the network to have this difference in the energy consumption? So we want to investigate the impact of the network congestion if it justify these results. And also the Nemesis, it uses simple policies for performing the migration. So we want to investigate if we can use more information of the network. Can we gain, because we would increase the quality of for the applications, but would this mean that we will perform less migration, then we could use less green energy? And to do this analysis, we extended the Nemesis algorithm. And since we extended, it's important to explain how it works. So the Nemesis is a framework that manages a set of cloud data centers distributed across the country. And these data centers, they are connected to both floor panels and can also use the grid as backup. And the grid is considered to be carbon intensive. And it has 4 main steps. In the first step, the users submit their VMs. And the Nemesis algorithm, it has information about the state of all the servers, the workload that is executing, and also has a brown and green energy prediction. And using this information, it applies grid heuristics to plan where the workload will be scheduled. And also important to say that the Nemesis is a central algorithm, it's a centralized algorithm. Okay. After the first pre-allocation, since it uses grid heuristics, it may not be the optimal solution. So because of the characteristics of the grid heuristics. So in the second step, it tries to review these allocations to see if it's possible to find a better option. In particular, it focuses on the servers that are not completely full. Because if you can remove the workload from the servers and make them empty, you could then after shut them down. So for example, here, you move the pre-allocation to the other data center. And then in the third step of the algorithm, to evaluate if it's possible to migrate the workload in execution. So for example, and as I said, it was more simple policy because it first distributes the migrations in time, so there is no overlap. And the second point is that each data center can only migrate to another 2 different data centers. And finally, it executes the server consolidation. So here, the idea is you migrate the workload to try to use a fewer number of servers. So then you can shut down the servers that became idle. And how we extended it? We focus on these 2 last steps of the algorithm, the migration of the raw VMs and the server consolidation. And now, for planning the migrations, we take into account the bandwidth and the usage of the links, the network topology in terms of the number of the links that are used, and also for the server consolidation, because you need to migrate the workload between the servers. We do not start them all simultaneously. We also try to distribute them over time to avoid generating congestion. So here, just to illustrate a little bit how the algorithm works. So here we have our set of data centers interconnected in the network. So if you first plan to execute this migration, we register it in our user history. And since we planned to, we know that we planned this migration. If we execute another migration to generate congestion, but we can yet migrate to these other data centers. And finally, for the server consolidation, they cannot be happen simultaneously. Otherwise, they use the same network links and can generate congestion. So we distribute them over time as well. Okay. And how do we access the network congestion? We define this perfect scenario. So it would be the scenario where all the migrations are executed again without any competition in the network. So they have full access to the network resources. And the congestion will be this additional time the migration takes in comparison to the perfect scenario. And we consider that the link could be in congestion if the migration is 10% longer. So for this visualization here. So this visualization is the network topology of the cloud infrastructure. So each line represents a network link, and the endpoints are the servers. And if the color is yellow, it means that no congestion happened during these 2 instants of times, as you see up there, so from midnight 10 to midnight 15. And if it's purple, it means that a migration passed between these links that was under congestion. So just to compare all the different algorithms. So in the bottom, we see the algorithms that do not use the network. So that's why they have the congestion basically throughout the entire week. So in the bottom left is the one that performed worst, is the algorithm that migrates only between 2 different data centers. So the duration there is in comparison to the perfect scenario. So for all the migrations in average, they were around 8 times longer than the perfect scenario, and the maximum over than 100 times. This one performed a little better because it only performs migrations inside the same data center. And the average it was around 4 times and the maximum 25 times. Up there on the right, we have the names that takes with the simple policies to consider the network. We see that already reduces a lot the occurrence of congestions, and the migrations were around 1.6 times longer than the perfect scenario, and the maximum around 4 times longer. And in the upper left is the extension of the names algorithm. That we see that by taking into account the network, we basically remove the existence of congestion during the week. So the migrations in average was around 1.0 times the perfect scenario, and the maximum around 1.32. And these congestions directly result in wastage of energy, because there's a computation task that's being executed to perform the migrations. And with one of the algorithms, the energy wasted could even be used to power the data center infrastructure. So one of the data centers could be powered by almost 2 days. And considering that we were simulating just 1 week, it's a relevant time. In terms of energy consumption, we see the CNAMES is the algorithm that we proposed that also takes into account the network. We see that it didn't increase the non-renewable energy consumption. So it had this similar or lower. And so we can only gain by adopting this network information. We didn't lose the quality of the algorithm in terms of the non-renewable energy consumption. So in summary, we saw that it's important to consider also the network for planning our migrations, because a bad planning could result in congestion that do not only impact the quality for the applications, but also results in wastage of energy. And this energy could even be used to power the data center infrastructure. And we also saw that it's important to consider the fault renewables for the whole lifetime of the workload, because as the renewable energy availability changes, it's also important to migrate the workload to profit more of this renewable energy. But until now, this context was only for a data center, a cloud federation inside a country. And modern clouds are distributed all over the world. Also, the data centers already had installed solar panels, which is not the case for all the data centers all over the world. And the grid, in some locations, already have presence of low carbon power. So how do we reduce the carbon footprint in this more modern scenario? So for this, I will present now the second strategy that I explored in my thesis that was also used together with the fault renewables. And we interned this second main contribution. So this model for sizing the renewable and the IT infrastructure for operating the data centers. So the main idea of the problem is how do you define the required area of solar panels and the capacity of the energy storage devices? So energy storage devices are interesting, for example, because you can charge the batteries during the day to use this energy during the night. But there are many considerations that should take into account when taking this decision. The first is the climate condition. Each region in the world has a different climate condition, receives different solar radiation levels throughout the year, also has different temperatures. So each location, we need a different power for cooling the data center infrastructure. The second is the energy mix, as you see in the figure of the electricity map. Some locations already have the presence of renewable sources. And using renewable infrastructure is not free. It also presents a carbon footprint. And for this problem, we proposed a linear program formulation for sizing the renewable infrastructure and for operating the data center. Here we consider the time span of 1 year and two main interesting points of our proposed solution. The first is that we perform the scheduling and the sizing as a single problem. So in that way we can analyze, should we allocate the workload to another data center, or we need to increase the renewable infrastructure in the initial data center. Other important point is that it only uses real variables, so we can find a solution in optimal solution in polynomial time. This is also important for the duration that we are evaluating for 1 year. And now talking about a little more about the modeling that we used. So for the data centers, we assume that they are this initial formulation. We assume that they are already built, so they already exist out distributed over the world. So this was the locations that we selected. They are homogeneous in terms of CPU cores. We model both the power consumption from the servers when they are idle and when they are computing, so both the idle and the dynamic power. Also consider the power consumption of the network, and to represent the cooling needs for each location around the world. Each data center has a different power usage effectiveness. In terms of the workload, we consider that they are batch tasks. They can be executed in any of the data centers, and they cannot be delayed. And in our first modeling, we didn't include the migration because, as we saw in the first part of the presentation, a bad planning of the migration can result in waste of energy. And in the context of data centers distributed all over the world, the latency is a problem. For example, for migrating a virtual machine, it could take up to almost 1 hour. So to our first proposition, we didn't include the migrations. Regarding the renewable infrastructure, we consider the specific characteristics of each renewable infrastructure. For example, you lose power when you charge, you lose energy when you charge the battery, you lose energy when you charge from the battery. Also, this maximum depth of the charge is that you cannot use the battery completely, otherwise you decrease its lifetime. For the solar panels, we also consider the efficiency of transforming solar irradiation in electricity. And in this first model, we considered only the emissions from the manufacturing, after we extended to also model for the whole life cycle. And regarding the emissions of the local grid, we also used values inspired in the real world. So, for example, Paris is has the lowest carbon intensity grid because there's a lot of nuclear power in France. São Paulo is the second lowest because there is hydroelectric power. And in the other end, you have Johannesburg is the most carbon intensive because they use coal, a lot of coal for producing power. And just to show quickly how we model how our model looks like. So for the power consumption of the data centers, we consider the power consumption of the network devices, so the intranet, in addition to the power of the servers when they are idle, so the P idle, and the power of executing the workload, that is the last PCOR times the WBK. And all of this is multiplied by the PUE to represent the cooling needs. And for the power supply of the data center. It can be supplied by this power produced by the renewables, so the PRE. The power from the grid can also be used, the grid. If there is energy in the batteries, they can be discharged, so PDCH. And if there's remaining renewable power, you can charge the batteries with the PCH. How did you model the renewable infrastructure? So for the batteries, they are modeled in terms of their level of energy. So that is how much energy there is in the battery. So to know how much energy you had in the battery at the time slot K, you need to know how much you had in the previous time slot, plus in addition with what you charged in the battery, and you remove what you discharged from the battery. And for the solar power production, you consider for each location the irradiation that you received times the area of the solar panel times the efficiency of the solar panel to transform the solar irradiation in electricity. Just to summarize our linear program, so we want to minimize the carbon footprint of operating the data centers, consider 1 year, and we consider also time slot of 1 hour, so we have over 8,000 time slots, and the CO2 comes from power from the grid and manufacturing the renewable infrastructure. What we use it as input, so the information about the servers in terms of the power consumption, and also the power consumption of the network equipment, the workload, so 1 year of workload inspired in Google Traces, information about the renewable infrastructure, and for each data center, we also collected the solar irradiation during 1 year, the footprint of the grid, the cooling needs represented by the PUE, and how many cores each data center had. And as output, we are interested in the area of the solar panels, the capacity of the batteries, and the total carbon footprint, and also the schedule of the workload. Okay, so now for the result in terms of carbon emissions, we compare 3 scenarios. So in the first, the data centers are only operated by consuming power from the local grid, so they don't have a local solar panels or batteries. They may use renewable energy only if the location, the grid at the location where the data center is installed has the presence of renewable energy. This second scenario is the opposite, so the data centers only consume power from their renewable infrastructure. And in the third is our approach that is lays in the middle, so you can either use only power from the grid, or you can use only power, you can use power both from the grid and for your renewable infrastructure. So we see that in the first scenario to the second, when you go to only using power from the grid to use only your renewable infrastructure, you already have a significant reduction in terms of carbon footprint, around 5 times. But if you consider this possibility of using power from the grid, you can further reduce your carbon emissions. So you reduce in around 6 times in comparison to using only the grid. And the reason for this is because since some locations already have the presence of the grid, you don't need, you can reduce your local renewable infrastructure. As you can see, this observation, when we see the results of the sizing process, so the dimensions of the solar panels and the batteries. So in purple, we see the capacity of the battery that was computed for each data center. In yellow, the area of the solar panels. So here, the data centers locations are sorted based on their grid carbon footprint. And the first thing you see in this figure is that São Paulo and Paris have the smallest renewable infrastructure. And the reason for this is because they already have a presence of low carbon intensive sources, so you don't need that much of renewable infrastructure. It's also interesting to observe that for Paris, it didn't even have batteries manufactured. It was better to consume power from the grid than to build a battery. Another interesting point is for Johannesburg. So Johannesburg is the location where the grid is the most carbon intensive, but we see that the area of the solar panel was the smallest in comparison to the other locations. And the reason for that is because in Johannesburg, it is one of the regions that receives most of solar radiation. So you need a smaller area to produce power. That's why it was smaller than the other locations. And now I also show visualization of the operation of the data centers to see how they are adopting the power renewables, and also to visualize the source of power that they are using. So here in this figure is similar to the one that I used to present the power renewables strategy. Each circle represents a location of the data center. The color of the circle will represent the source of electricity that is being used. So for example, here in Australia, it's using power from solar panels. In these locations where it's night, it's using power in purple, discharged from the batteries. And in Paris, that is yellow, it's using power from the grid because it's a low carbon intensive power from nuclear sources. So we observe in the figure that the workload is being mostly allocated to the locations where it's producing renewable power, so during the day. And during the night, it's also using renewable power because it's the power charged in the batteries. And for the 3 locations that they are using grid power, it's because they are the region where the grid is the lowest carbon intensity. For example, in Paris, there's nuclear power. In São Paulo, there is hydroelectric power. And for Virginia, in the United States, it is the location that has the lowest carbon intensity grid in comparison to the other locations of the world, the exception of Paris and São Paulo. Okay. But for this first modeling, we focus only in the short-term scenario, that is the scenario for 1 year. But the data centers have a lifetime of around a decade. So there's other points that we investigated to extend our modeling. So for example, in this first modeling, we only consider the footprint of manufacturing the servers, the infrastructure, but there are other phases of the life cycle of this infrastructure that also emits carbon. So the operates and maintenance and discarding. So included this in our modeling. The second point is that the workload keeps increasing over time, and over the years, new servers that can be more power efficient also can be launched. As we saw in the beginning, the example that the workload increased 6 times, but the electricity only 6%, the energy consumption. And we also investigated other strategies that could further reduce the carbon footprint. For example, could we use wind power to be used together with solar panels to reduce the carbon footprint? In our first modeling, the workload was not possible to be delayed, so we also investigated about delaying the workload. And finally, one of the points that is very important for the data centers owners is costs. They only will adopt a solution if it's not expensive. They want their business to be lucrative. So we extended the model to evaluate all of the scenarios, but today I will only focus in these 3. So the first 2 is for sizing regarding the IT infrastructure, and the last one for the cost of adopting the local renewable infrastructure. So for the cost, how do we measure the cost of the renewable infrastructure? We have these 2 metrics, levelized cost of energy and levelized cost of storage. So they measure all the price regarding manufacturing, operating, maintenance of the renewable infrastructure related to the power this renewable infrastructure can deliver. And it's similar for the batteries and for the renewable infrastructure. So the result of this metric is in dollar per kilowatt hour. So for the renewable structure, renewable kilowatt hour of electricity produced, and for the batteries, kilowatt hour of electricity delivered that you can charge from the battery. And since each location has different climate conditions, each location will also have a different price for the renewable infrastructure. So here I'm comparing the price of using power from the grid in purple, for the solar panels in green, and for the wind turbines in yellow for all of these locations. So again, the data centers are sorted by their carbon footprint. So we can see clearly that the solar panels produce the cheapest energy for all these locations that we selected. For the wind turbines, just for some locations, it is cheaper than the grid, for example, just in Canberra and Paris. And one of the reasons for this is because in these locations there is not so much wind. So the wind do not blow at speeds enough to turn the propellers. So you would need a big number of wind turbines to generate power. That's why that's the most expensive. So in terms of results, and for the batteries, it costs $20 for discharging 1 kilowatt for the battery. Okay, so in terms of results, here I'm showing for two objectives. You can minimize the cost of your operation, or you can minimize your carbon footprint. So in yellow, you're minimizing your carbon footprint, and in purple, and also when the text is rotated, you are minimizing your costs. And I'm also showing some different configurations of the infrastructure. For example, using only the grid or using a configuration of wind turbines, batteries, and grid. The x-axis is the emissions, and the y-axis is the cost of in millions of dollars. So the first thing we can observe is for using only the grid, you perform worse if you want to optimize your carbon footprint or your cost. So here, regarding the carbon footprint, you see that all the solutions that adopt renewable infrastructure are to the left of this point. So they have a smaller carbon footprint. And also in terms of costs, here using only the grid, you see that all the other solutions, when you want to optimize your cost that uses renewable infrastructure, they have a lower price because it's below this point. Okay. And one interesting point is for reducing the environmental impact of the cloud platforms is the solution that we use a combination of solar panels, batteries, and grid. You see that it's not that much expensive that using only the grid. It's not that much upper, but you see that you have a big reduction in environmental impact. So a big reduction in the emissions of the cloud infrastructure. And regarding the sizing, so the sizing the IT is to how do you define the number of servers you need in your platform? And again, we need to consider that workload will increase over time. Maybe new servers that are more power efficient will be launched, but you cannot neglect that when you manufacture the servers, you also emit carbon. And for the data we use it for the footprint of the servers, we use data inspired from the model of Gupta, because it uses updated data to compute the CO2, so data for the specific components of the servers. So for example, in his article, he compared the footprint of this Dell R707 server. So this 4,000 kilograms was the value reported from the life cycle analysis from Dell. But when you use the values for the specific components and the specific technology, the footprint was reduced. So the real, more realistic value is around 6 times smaller. So we used values inspired in his methodology to have more precise values for manufacturing the servers. Okay, so a model can be used to simulate many scenarios of comparison of if you want to add or replace the servers. So now we will compare the decision of is it worth to you to replace to the distinct owners to replace the servers every year? And to evaluate this decision, we compare with the optimal solution. That is the solution that you know in advance, all the servers, all the workload, and all the climate conditions. So for the settings, we consider that the workload increased 25% each year. This forecast was inspired by what was predicted by Cisco. The expected lifetime of the servers is 4 years. So this does not mean that the server you stop working after the 4th year. This is only for considering their footprint. So the carbon footprint is considered only for the 4th year. For the 4 years, after the 4th year, you could replace the server without paying, without cost in terms of carbon footprint. And we simulated 5 years of operation. Okay. So here is the configuration of the servers that we selected. So these servers were selected based on the spec power benchmark. So the spec power benchmark, it ranks servers of cloud platforms based on their the servers of cloud platforms based on their efficiency to execute computations. So we selected the server of each year that has the highest score. And it's also interesting to see that some years the same server, the same CPU is used. In the second row, we have 2017-78 with the same processor. We also see that the number of cores keep increasing over time. And for the power consumption, the P idle is the power when the server is idle, it's not executing anything. And the P core is to compute the dynamic power consumption. Finally, we see that in terms of footprint, it keeps increasing over time. Okay, so for the results, so first I will show for this grid solution, so the solution that is made every year. So every year, you know, okay, this is this new server that is launched. Should I add this to my infrastructure or not? So 2016 is the year that you have the initial infrastructure. So in 2017, a new generation of server was launched, and the workload also increased by 25%. So here it decided to buy some servers. So you see that in this graph, the size of the bars is the number of CPU cores, and the color represents which generation of server the cores belong. So you see that we added now servers of the second generation. In the next year, 2018, the workload also increased, so we added more servers of the next generation. The next year, a new generation of server was launched, so these servers from this third generation. And these servers are more power efficient than the previous generation. But in the previous years, you already had manufactured many servers. So you cannot just discard them, because you just manufactured them, you still pay the carbon. So that's why it replaced servers from the first generation, because it's considered that they were used long enough, so they could be removed without generate carbon footprint. And again, in the next year, the workload kept increasing, so it manufactured more servers of the third generation. And finally, the next generation of servers was considered in the evaluation. And it, again, it didn't remove the servers from the previous generation, the new servers, because they were just manufactured. So it removed the servers from the oldest generation. But if you know what would be in advance, all the configuration of the servers and now the workload, what would be the optimal solution? So here I have the comparison between the two solutions. The optimal solution is just to evaluate, because it's hard to know in advance what will be the configuration of the servers in the next 5 years. So just to evaluate this proposed solution. So we see that the ideal would be to keep the servers of the first generation, because they can still be, they are computationally powerful, they can still execute the workload, and you do not pay the price of manufacturing the servers. In terms of carbon footprint, you see that this would be 30% better than this grid solution. And this optimal solution is also interesting to motivate extending the lifetime of the servers. So you see that the server from the first generation was extended more 5 years, and also motivates to wait in this, as you see, it waits for the best solution. So if you make the decision in longer periods, maybe you have the chance of having a server that is more computational powerful and more power efficient. So you maybe can avoid reaching a local minimum. Okay, so for the second my contribution, I proposed in our program formulation for both sizing and operating the data centers. it uses follow the renewables approach. It's flexible to evaluate many scenarios, as I presented. And it also considers the characteristics of each location to develop the solution. It is also solved in polynomial time. It is important to have a solution that is, because you evaluate many scenarios, you need to have a quick solution. And as future research directions, the first would be to evaluate other types of environmental impact, because I only evaluated the carbon footprint that are other types of impact as water usage and extracting raw minerals. Migrating the workload, if we could integrate the migration in the models, how much would we reduce the carbon footprint? Robustness, because this solution is like an offline solution. What if the workload was different of what we use it for making the sizing, or the climate conditions are very different from what we use it? Maybe you can integrate the first part of the thesis to plan migrations. For example, you know that in 1 hour, your data center you not have more renewable power. How can you plan to migrate workload without generating congestion? Other point is the degradation of the renewable infrastructure, because the efficiency decreased over the years. And until now, we evaluated these data centers that already existed. If we have, for example, a set of locations, the climate condition and the expected workload, we could define which would be the best location to reduce the carbon footprint if you want to buy a new data center. In this project, my thesis received funding from both the Brazilian and the French government. So I would like to thank all these funding agencies. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm glad to answer any question.
Thank you very much. So we'll switch now to the question session.
Can you put
the jury in front of us? We can see you now. And we'll start with the question first with your reviewers. And let's start with Patricia Pascal-Stock from Toulouse, if you can.
Yes, thank you very much. First, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. So thank you very much, Miguel, for the presentation. I also really appreciated your manuscript. So thank you for all of this. The work is very interesting and is quite linked to what we are doing in the project Data Zero. So I really appreciated your work, your experiments, and all what you did. I have many questions I will not ask all, but I will ask some. First, I have a question about live migration, because they decided at what moment, but renewable is intermittent, so maybe later then the data center will become brown. So I wonder if there is a risk that live migration can make an infinite loop at the moment, and how can you answer that your approach propose an execution of the workload which is quite stable?
So just to see if I understand the question, you say that it's possible, for example, to migrate, and when the migration ends, the renewable energy will not be available at the data center.
No, maybe in that data center it becomes more brown. So another migration is beginning from this new data center to another one, and so on and so on. So the workload is migrating in an infinite loop.
Okay, so for the migration, it's taken in time slots. So the algorithm works in time slots, so 5 minutes each, and it considers that the migration needs to finish during this time slot. So it only executes the migration if it's possible to finish during this time slot.
Okay, but my question is more from one time slot to another, because when you execute a workload, it is not for one time slot, it is for the entire execution of the workload.
Yeah. So yeah, a virtual machine could be migrated to many.
Yes, this is my question, yes.
Yeah, so there's if you do not consider, for example, the renewable energy, do not have a good estimative of how would be the renewable energy, you could maybe ping pong.
Yes.
So
And it happened?
It's important to consider it. So for example, the algorithms as baselines, they only consider the current energy that is available. So sometimes this happens, ping pong. For the other baselines. For the
and for your contribution, does it happen?
Since it uses this prediction, so it reduces the chance of happening, but the prediction is not perfect, so sometimes it can happen.
Okay. And do you think it is possible? It would be possible to add something to eliminate this loop or this ping pong? For example, if there has been 2 or 3 live migrations, then we do not migrate because at the end, maybe it consumes more because of the network than if we do not migrate or something like that.
And maybe you, for example, could use some cooldown, like you just migrated. You cannot migrate for some instead of times, because maybe you are using the wrong prediction. So you could wait for a little bit to see if it change the results. So in this way, you could also reduce the migration of the workload. Or maybe because until now we are not interested in the quality of service. So I consider that the virtual machine could be migrated to any of the data centers. But if the quality of service, you could be also limit try to limit where it's possible to migrate, and if it's also important, also limit the number of migrations to avoid because maybe you can generate some inconsistencies, because also need to migrate all the data from the programs. So maybe you can also limit the number of the migrations to avoid this problem.
Okay. And do you think you have evaluated if the overhead of energy due to the live migration is compensated by using greener data center?
Yes, because we saw that it was the algorithm that resulted in the smallest non-renewable energy consumption. It migrated to the data centers where it had higher green energy.
Okay. In your sizing resolution, you consider that you know the workload computing demand from clients. But what is not clear for me is that is it the past workload? Is it traces that you replay? Is it a prediction of the future workload?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the workload we used was based on a generator that uses statistical properties of the Google traces. So in the first part of the sizing of just 1 year, because it's hard to find traces for cloud providers. So the longest duration is like 1 month. So we use the synthetic traces for the sizing. But if the solution is adopted by a real cloud provider, he has more knowledge about his traces. So he can use a more accurate input. We try to use inputs that is what you could have that is more realistic to cloud providers. But we are aware that the sizing is directly related to the input you use. Because if you had a workload that is a higher workload, it would mean more power consumption. That would mean you need more power, more renewable infrastructure. So use it inspired in the traces from real cloud providers.
Okay. And do you consider that it is a constant workload over the years, or do you consider that the mass of workload could increase as it is predicted by different researchers?
Yeah, for the simulation that is, for the analysis that is deciding over the years, it was considered that workload increased 25% each year.
Okay. 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 I come back to live migration. Did you evaluate the impact on the QoS for the user? I mean, maybe you could also see if the user can agree to have a reduction of quality of service, what kind of reduction or live migration you could accept to be greener or something like that?
The quality of service was not considered, but for example, this is one of the possibilities, like asking of the user if he accepts his quality to be degraded, and also level of degradation. For example, if it's too restrictive, you cannot migrate, so it will remain executing of the data center. But if there's some flexibility, you can also include this in the modeling to see to each data center it could be migrated. Maybe you could even reward the user somehow. Like if he accepts the degradation, it will reduce the footprints.
Okay. Can you come back to slide 31, please? 32, sorry. Yes, this one. So if we use renewable energy and grid, it is better than only renewable energy. Is it?
Because here, the hybrid configuration is the renewable infrastructure of the data center and using the grid. The grid may have or not integration for renewable energy. Depends on the location of the data center.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, that's it. In fact, depending on the mix energetic in the grid, you could also have a grid which is quite green, in fact.
Yeah, so here is the location, the information of the locations that we used, the carbon footprint of the grid.
So it really depends on the number of data centers and where you place them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Did you evaluate different configuration of these geographic positions?
Yeah, for only this was inspired from real location of data centers from Microsoft Azure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. When you present the analysis of the monetary cost, it seems that you conclude that the renewable infrastructure can reduce costs for the cloud operators. So what are your conclusions with this slide?
Yes, we see that it has a smaller cost, but here is considering this metric considers the whole lifetime of the infrastructure. So, for example, maybe in the short term it could be expensive, because manufacture everything first buy, and also maybe there are some logistics problems. But in the long term, we see that it will be cheaper to use renewable infrastructure.
Okay, but where do you see long term and short term?
Yeah, here is only the analysis for the long term. So in the long term, it's cheaper to adopt the renewable infrastructure.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's turn now to the second reviewer of this work, who is Julita Corbalan Gonzalez from Barcelona.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, also Thank you very much for the presentation. Also, as I said in my review, I found the work very, very, very interesting. There was a lot of information that I was not aware of, so it was very useful, let's say, to me, also for my research. So thank you for that. I also have a few questions. Basically, some of them are probably some also clarifications that are already made in my review. So the first two questions are about the first contribution. It was not clear to me. I don't remember exactly from the documentation, and it was not 100% clear on the presentation. Is when the allocation of a job is made, it is based on resources, or also the availability of green energy is also taken into account when for the allocation, not for the migration.
Yeah, so for the allocation, this slide system. So for the names that we extended, it has a prediction of the short-term green energy availability, and also a prediction of the brown energy that will be consumed in the data center. So it also has some information of the renewable energy. For the baselines, so the other two, they only have information of the current availability of renewable energy.
And resources, no? I understand, or not? Well, energy includes time, so I assume it's the availability of resources and the cost of the energy, no? Or not?
Because here is only what is available right now. So for the names, it's also in a short time window. So in the next few hours, so for example, until the night, I know I have an estimation of how much renewable energy there is left. Here, for the other algorithms, is actually the power being produced right now.
Okay, because that was my one of my concerns in the review is if because at some moments in the document you were talking about I think so, if I remember well, about the availability of energy, and I was wondering if it's energy or it's power, because the power is instantaneous, but the energy takes into account the whole duration of the job. So in your case, in your contribution, it's taking into account for the allocation, just to clarify, the instantaneous power from renewables sources, or for the whole execution of the job, and then it's energy? Because I was also wondering what's the reason for the migration, no? Why it's better to migrate following this type of energy if for the allocation is already taken into account energy, then the execution time should be included, no? It's not the case. Well, the question is, can you clarify how that works exactly, if it's power or it's energy?
It's energy, but not for the whole duration of the job. So it's for some few hours in the future. And for example, it's important to migrate because it's just an estimate of the renewable energy. So it can not be, it's not perfect, so it can be wrong. So you can, at first moment, you can correct to migrate to other data center. And when you migrate, you can also use the renewable energy of the other data center. For example, if there's a cloud or something that reduces the renewable energy, you migrate to the other.
Yeah, something that was confusing me a little bit is, given in the first part of your thesis, all the data centers are, from a geographical point of view, very similar, or at least this is what I understand, because they are all in France. I was wondering why you were not configuring data centers that were really geographically different, no? One, as you did in the second part, no? Because it's a big difference between Paris and Grenoble, for example, from the energy point of view. I mean, these 2 hours will change from Paris to another data center in France. I don't see that could be so different, no, between one or the other, or it's because the others have some potentially some different sources like wind turbines or things like that compared to, for example, to Paris or to other places? Because compared for the daily time in terms of hours of sun, I assume it's exactly the same, no? So what's in the case of the first part, what's the reason to go from one to the other, and why you didn't select it or configure in your simulator a data center that was really, really one far from the other, no, to make it more clear this effect of following the renewable energies?
And so we selected these data centers because they are inspired in a real example. So in this way, you can have information, and this information public, about how the servers are interconnected in the network. So from the public cloud providers, we do not have, for example, from Azure or from Google, we do not have access about exactly how it's the network between the servers and the data centers. What they have is like some information only about the latency. And from the Grid 5000, we have information about all the network topology, the links that interconnect all the servers, also the latency of the links. So we selected because of this reason. And for the renewable energy traces, yeah, we can use the other values. Would be other scenario to evaluate as well. We used these traces because were used in the work. This part was the work that we extended the names. And they kind of this location are not the traces produced are not the exactly values of each location. So they are produced by a solar panel located in University of Nantes. And for each data center location, it used a different week. So we have that's why we have different power profiles.
Oh, okay. So in some way you force, no, this difference.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, in the computation of the cost of the migration of a job, are you, apart from the network traffic congestion and so on, are you taking into account the time to start the virtual machines? Because I assume that you are migrating, I assume you are based the work assuming you are moving virtual machines, no, not the typical traditional HPC job, for example, no. So that has an extra cost of starting this virtual machine in the new servers.
Yeah.
This is included, or only the network traffic?
Is included also, because when you finish the migration, you also need to send a message that you finished copying, and this message will also will be transferred to the destination host, and depending on the distance in the latency, it can take a little bit. So it's considered not only the data, but when the migration finishes and when it should start in the target host.
Okay, so not only the migrating the data, also starting the start of the area. Okay. Okay. So when you were talking about these nice pictures you have put at the beginning, no, with this yellow and these purple areas that you were showing how there was more congestion on one and the others, I was wondering if, apart from taking into account let's say the less penalization in your migrations, have you taken into account the reduction in the noise or in the congestion in the jobs that were already running in the other data centers? Because if you migrate using some links or some paths that are already in use, maybe I assume you will also negatively affect the jobs already running, no? So the benefit on your migration is a direct impact, but have you considered also the indirect benefit that you will introduce in the jobs already running, that you will not add extra noise or extra, also more significant, because if there was some congestion, if you were migrating also using these paths, that will be even worse, no? Is that taken into account or not considered, so you can have even more benefits or even more collateral benefits?
It was not considered because the only load was in the network was migrating the jobs. The jobs itself, because they are inspired in real traces, these traces did not provide the information on the load, the network load, network usage. So this is like just a lower bound, because it's only the load on the migrations. But if we incorporate the information of the usage of the network by the jobs, yeah, we can gain we can also maybe reduce some migrations. You change the planifying, but one challenge could be to keep monitoring the migration, keep monitoring the usage of the network by the jobs. So you need to see how to incorporate this in a way that do not only need to be scalable because of the amount of network links that you have for the cloud providers. Maybe maybe some local analysis for each user for each local, like a mini graph of network links, some observers distributed all over the network.
Okay, can you go one moment to slide 37, please? Yeah, so to be honest, this graph was not clear to me at all. It was confusing me why, for example, grid happens twice in the graph. I think I understand what you try to represent in the figure, but I am still wondering why grid is twice in the graph and what's the meaning of that.
Okay, so because here I'm showing for two objectives you want to optimize. If you want to optimize your costs, so it's in purple and the text is in rotated, or you want to optimize your carbon footprint, the text is in yellow. So for example, here you wanted to optimize the costs for the grid, and that you see that it's the worst in terms compared to including the renewable infrastructure, because it is the point that is the tallest. So it's because you can size the optimization objective of your sizing process. So you can either, okay, I want to minimize my cost, the cost of my operation. Then this was the result. Or I want to minimize my carbon footprint. I don't care about the cost. It's the values in yellow. It's just to compare the two different optimization objectives.
But I still don't understand why you have two points in the same graph with the same name. I mean, I understand there are the two axes, no? You can try to optimize one or the other, but I don't see how you generate or how to interpret the two points. But well, anyway, I don't want to focus here. Don't worry.
Here it shows the trade-offs. So, for example, if you want to minimize the cost of your data centers, or if you want to minimize the carbon emissions of your data centers.
Maybe it's you can say that it's the extreme points of your Pareto front.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, if you can go to slide number 40, please. Oh, 41, sorry, I think it's the next one. One where you were showing the optimal and this one. Okay. I didn't understand clearly how you generate the optimal solution. It was a combination of all the use cases to see what's the one that minimizes the CO2 or the cost. I mean, it was generated in a different way.
Yeah, here is only focused in minimizing the carbon footprint. So for the optimal solution, So the program knows all these inputs in advance, so all the information of the servers in advance, and all the workload in advance. So it's perform the sizing for the 5 years. For the grid, it only perform the sizing year by year. So the first figure, it only here, for example, it only perform the sizing using information about the server and so on. So for each year, it gives information only of that year. And the optimal is just to evaluate this approach. So it's the scenario where you would know in advance all the information of the servers.
Okay. And a final question in that part, did you take into account the increment in the cost of the servers and all the other increment also in general? Because if you, of course, if in 2016 you cannot buy a processor that is not yet available, no, that's clear, I understand, no. But if you were having the capacity, or an estimation of the total workload you will have in 5 years, is it compare the cost and the carbon footprint, of course, of trying to cover everything with, or having all the processors since the beginning with the processors available in that year, compared with the better processor, but also expensive processors that will be available after in the next years? I mean, the cost is already taken into account. That's my main question, not only on the server, but also on the installation, the disruption in the activity or things like that, which is difficult not to take into account, but at least the cost.
Yeah, we focus only in the environmental impact. The cost is also like a future work. How do we would integrate the cost not only of the servers, and for these other problems related to, for example, as I said, logistic problems, cost of installing the servers, we need to see if it's really important to include in the modeling, or how can we, if it's relevant to model this, or it could be do not need to be modeled. We need to perform this analysis yet. Here is what's only focus on the environmental impacts, and maybe also a more contact with industry could help give a feedback of what could be included in terms of costs there, because they know what is the most relevant inputs and parameters that could be modeled for including the cost in our sizing process.
Well, as I already commented, I like very much the effort of putting together all these things, because it's really impressive the amount of parameters input that you have taken into account. I agree with you that you have to select the most relevant, no, for the decision. But just a comment, is a personal opinion. Something you should not forget. You should not forget is the human factor, no? That for example, the fact that you, for example, you were considering changing a data center infrastructure every year, I think that will be a completely nightmare. No one will do that. But that's completely my personal opinion, no? I understand that maybe it's better to do every 3 years, for example, than every 5 or 7, because you can adapt to the workload capacity, no? But you will fight against a wall if you try to do something, for example, extend or install things every year, no? Because there are a lot of problems in the infrastructure with the people working in the data center and so on. Anyway, this is very, very difficult to model. So it's a completely collateral comment from my side, just because I like it very much, you know, what you were doing. So this is why I wanted to mention. So again, thank you. And that's all from my side.
And here is just one of the possible scenarios evaluated. Is also the model is flexible enough to model, for example, the change in 3 to 3 years, 7 years. So here was just one scenario showing what if the decision was made year by year, but the model is flexible to simulate many years, many configuration of years.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So let's continue. Like energy, we are traveling around the world, going from Toulouse, Barcelona, and now we'll go to Brazil with Lucia Brumont, who is a minor of your
work. Lucia.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and presentation. I realized you worked very hard, Miguel, and I liked your work, but as usual, I have some suggestions and questions. And I will give you my suggestions and chapter by chapter, okay? And some questions also. So initially in chapter 2, I would like to see a table with the related works, with the main contributions and characteristics, and showing the difference with your proposal. And perhaps one suggestion would be to divide the chapter which contains background and related work into different chapters. But it's only a suggestion. You showed a table in your presentation, and I think it was very good to understand your contribution, and I think it should be interesting to include that table in your text.
Okay.
In chapter 3, I had some questions. I didn't understand very well. Usually, aren't the networks that connect data centers shared among other data centers, other servers, for example, on the internet? And here, I think you considered a dedicated network, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the 5,000 infrastructure.
Yeah. So I think do you think this idea can be used in other contexts of commercial cloud providers?
Yeah. So for commercial cloud providers, we do not have many information of the number of links that interconnects all the two nodes, but we have information of the latency of the links. So we use this information to at least see how long it's possible to migrate, to see if it's feasible or not.
Okay. Yes, perhaps you should add some comments about that. Another suggestion is including a table of variables for algorithms 1, 2, and 3. And I have a question close to Julita's question about the migration. And because when you migrate a job to another data center, maybe there are other jobs running in that data center, and that's not considered, right?
Let's consider if the server that we receive has available space to receive the virtual machine.
Okay. So another question is, and if two different data centers decide to migrate their jobs to the same data center, because you don't have a global knowledge of the cloud, right? You have the information, the local information about the links, and perhaps of the workloads of the data centers, the neighbor data centers. But if two different data centers decide to migrate their jobs for the same data center, do you treat this? I did not understand how you treat this.
So, it is an extension of the Nemesis algorithm, and Nemesis is a centralized controller, so it has information of all the nodes. So this scenario, in theory, could not happen, because it will know that you already planned a migration, so you cannot plan another migration to.
Okay, so a controller decides if a data center will send its workload to another one, right? It's a centralized algorithm. Okay. 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 So you do not. It's not a distributed decision. Okay.
Yeah.
I noted that in chapter 4, using the terms multi-cloud, cloud federation, and cloud. I think you could use only one term, I think, because it's a cloud, a unique cloud, right?
Yeah, there's many ways to say the same thing. Yeah, so I can use this one term for.
Okay. And I think you already answered that question, but you assume that tasks submissions are centralized.
Yeah.
And the decision is centralized, but isn't it too strong, a too strong assumption for cloud environments? What do you think?
Yeah, it depends on the. So in the sizing process is like we are focused more on defining the reliable infrastructure. So it's like a long-term process. It's not like for the scheduling decision in the short term, but for example, the size of cloud workloads is huge. So centralized solution could have some problems. For example, the time that need to process all the workload. So one possibility is to have like many local controllers, so that way you can like do a global treatment, then you would send directly to the other local controller. In that way, you can like reduce the time to process the request.
A hierarchical solution, perhaps.
For example.
Okay, okay. And in table 4.1, the notation of lowercase k is not clear. Please look at that.
Okay.
It's not necessary to see it now, but I think there is a problem there.
Okay.
I also noted that you didn't consider storage in your model, right?
Batteries are considered only for the sizing. In the first part of the names and names is only solar panels. So, but for the sizing, it's considered battery.
You did not. Did you consider disks, storage, I/O?
Storage, computational storage, no.
Yes, data storage. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's the power consumption is only modeled based on the server power consumption in the network device.
But did you think storage is data storage is an important component? Do you think it's an important in terms of power consumption?
Yeah, we focus more on the server's power consumption because for the CPU, because it's the highest share of the power consumption of the server comes from the CPU. In our case, that we are not considering GPUs, only servers with CPUs.
Okay, perhaps
Now,
in the future, who knows?
Data of the power consumption.
Mm-hmm.
You know how available is the data for the power consumption of the network disk storage types. So we modeled on the CPU because we also have more data available of the power consumption.
Okay. Now I verified your linear formulation, mathematical formulation, carefully, but I did not see how constraint 410 was used in your formulation. I did not see how W was used in your linear formulation. Would you please explain it to me?
Yeah.
Constraint 410. And where W is used in your mathematical formulation? Because you put that constraint, but I did not see how that constraint was used.
Oh.
Yes, that constraint. I did not see how it was applied in the formulation. Use it as a constraint, but where it impacts the formulation?
Okay,
Because
so the CD is the number of CPU cores you have at the data center D. So
yes.
and WDK is how much cores are being used to process the tasks of the workload allocated to that data center.
Yes.
So you need to respect the capacity of the data center. So that's
Okay, but
what-
where W appears in the formulation? It's the constraint. But
Yeah.
in which equation it appears?
It is used for model the power consumption of the servers.
In the first, not for that formulation. In that I saw, but
Yeah.
in the first, in that I saw, but the first formulation, the linear formulation.
So the W is used here when we model the power consumption of the data center. So
Okay.
consider this P idle is the power
Okay.
when the timers are idle.
Okay, okay. Now I saw. Thank you, Miguel. I didn't
Or-
find it, and it was where it appears. Okay, okay. Thank you. And okay, I didn't understand how date of table 4.5 was obtained. I had several. I did not see very clearly which data you calculated or you obtained from other sources. So many parts of your thesis were not clear for me in this point. I did not understand very well which was produced by you or you obtained from other papers and adapted it to your thesis.
Okay, so this in the table 4.5.
5, yes, 4.5. In the thesis, I don't know in the
It's the same as this
presentation.
one. Yeah. Okay, so here is the result of our modeling of the linear program using different inputs. So
But
the first
Miguel, sorry, is that the table 4.5 of your thesis?
yeah,
It's the same.
it's 4.5. That's this.
No, look at the number of.
Okay, okay.
No,
Okay. Okay. Right.
Sorry.
That's the table, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How did you obtain those data?
Okay, so we after sizing, we process the result of the sizing. So here is using this metric. So is this WK was the workload
Okay.
that was executed throughout the data centers. So we got the resolution of our linear program. We process it using this metric. And here is the values for these three scenarios of the previous table. So it's based on the solution of these three scenarios.
Oh, okay. Sometimes it was very confusing for me, the results you presented, if they were, how did you obtain them? It's not, I know you showed the algorithms, several data, but the results, it was not clear exactly how they were obtained. Perhaps, I don't know if the other ones had the same problem, but for me, it was not very clear in several points. Another point is the scheduling algorithm. I know that with your formulation, you follow renewals algorithm, you produce a scheduling. But I don't know if I missed it, but I did not see a scheduling algorithm described in detail. And I think I missed it, the scheduling algorithm or the migration algorithm. I understand that you proposed a strategy that with the consequences, the migration schedule but I don't know if I missed it.
Yeah, so in this part, the scheduling the decision of the scheduling is made by the linear program, respecting the constraints that we.
Yes, but the linear program, no, the linear program produces the calculation of something related to energy, and using that information, you produces a scheduling map and take decisions related to migration, right?
So here, in this second part, it was not included the migrations. So the linear program solved both the siting, so it computed the solar panel areas, the capacity of the batteries, and it also defines where the workload should be executed.
I did not see that. I did not see that, or Miguel. In the first linear, in which part, please? Because you say initially that the linear, the output of the first linear program. You do not say that it produces a map or scheduling map.
Yes, the output is that same variable WKD. It relates to the schedule of the workload. So
where is it? I can see the text here. Please.
Maybe on page 52. The current decision program aims to define the additional.
In this chapter, explore the adoption of size and division, and then the two subproblems are modeled as a single problem. It's the first, it's which chapter is that?
The chapter 4 is in the.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay, but later, okay, you say that, and later, two subproblems, okay, and later, it's really allows to optimize solve the problem. This allows. No, okay, later, please. Okay, but this section describes notation, the optimal approach for solving the decision, investigates address the problem. This will have an existing both in operation, the cloud. Okay, so by schedule its work to green, okay.
You mean you're wondering whether there is migration here or not?
No, the migration, I think it's not there, but I think the task submission is centralized. I think the migration is not here.
No,
but
the previous one, yeah.
Okay, task submission, okay. Number of server, power consumption, specifically renewable infrastructure, okay. I don't know. I can see later. Okay, I see later. But I think it's not what was not clear for me. How it's W that I don't know, Miguel. Perhaps I missed it, but the scheduling part was not clear for me.
Okay.
So I don't know. Perhaps I have. I realize you put. I solved the two sub problems, but it was not clear for me the output of the linear problem, but I try to find it and I show if, or I see if I had, I missed something, but I see later, okay? Okay, I see exactly the sentence that's, but I do not have it here now. So, okay.
So yeah, the scheduling will be defined by this variable. So I can clarify in the text.
Okay, okay.
Regarding the scheduling map.
Okay, the W, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so to finish, I think that you showed the carbon print and also the financial cost. I think that as those two objectives are important, you could formulate in the future a multi-objective problem, considering cost and carbon print, perhaps in a weighted function, considering these two objectives. So, okay, that's it. Thank you for the presentation. And I'll try to find if, or perhaps I see if I had a problem when I read it, the part that I thought it was confusing, perhaps for me, and I will send it later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now let's come back to France with Anne-Cécile Orgerie.
Yes. So can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Great. Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. I also have a lot of questions, so I may not ask them all, but I will start with the migration model, so that you showed in slide 8, which is a migration model for the first contribution. So yes, so on this migration model, I have several questions. First, did you try to check whether it is realistic in terms of energy consumption? So did you perform some power measurements on real servers in order to check this?
For the power consumption,
Yes.
so this migration model is inspired on the modeling of the SIMGrid for performing the live migration of virtual machines. So in terms of network, it's validated.
For the performance, yes, but for the power consumption,
we didn't execute measurements. So we assume that it's one CPU core that is used in the target host. But we didn't perform real measurements to validate this.
Okay. And so which kind of migration, in fact, you are considering? Which kind of migration model you are considering?
Live migration. So the workload keeps executing during the whole execution, the whole migration.
So I guess you are speaking of migrating, for instance, the memory pages.
Only the memory pages.
Okay, so you're not considering the disk migration. No. Okay. So how do you think it could be taken into account to have this kind of disk migration in your algorithms?
Mm-hmm.
How it could be, which part you would have to modify to take into account disk migration, for instance?
So we need to take into account the types of the disk, so the speed of reading the data from the disks, and this we have this additional time, and we also would have the time of the size of the data for sending the whole data over the network. And depending on the size of the data that's used for the workload for the virtual machine, maybe could not be feasible to migrate it, because it would be too expensive to migrate. Like it would take very long time to perform the migration, if you maybe consider the big data set. So maybe it could also be possible to do like evaluate if the data is also available at the destination host, so you avoid migrating the data, because some data sets are reused by many types of workloads. And other point is that we didn't model yet the power consumption of the disk, so this could also be included for evaluating if it's the gains of performing the migration.
So I'd like to come back also to slide 21, when it's a conclusion of this first contribution. Yes, so the 21, yes. So the first conclusion the wasted energy proportional to this extra times spending migrating. This conclusion for me, it's only because you assume the model, the power model that we were discussing before. So this conclusion is highly related on this assumption on the power consumption of migration to me, which is one of the limitations of the work. So I don't know if you agree with this, but this conclusion is only due to the power model that you consider.
Yeah, but, if you also, for example, depending on how it consider the disks, it will increase the duration of the migration. So a bad migration planning will result in a longer wastage of energy because you are no longer migration, that you also waste more energy because you are migrating more data.
Proportional, the word proportional, it's only due because you are considering that each migration is only using one core, and one core is linearly depending on the CPU power consumption. The proportional word here, it's only depending on that for me. And considering disk may change this.
Yeah,
so that is a minor comment. So you compared the original Nemesis algorithm that I know, and for the migration part, I was quite not sure to understand what you modified. If you can come back on slide 19, which is a network topology. 19, yes. Well, and the other ones. So the network topology that you are considering, it's or maybe the previous, the 18. You have you have another network topology where you show the capacity of the links. Maybe you have several, slide 19.
For the input, so
yeah, this one, yeah, for instance, this one, yeah, sorry, it was 9, yeah. So here it's quite obvious that for each site, in fact, there is only one possible network bottleneck because you have only one router going outside. And so I don't understand why in your modified version of Nemesis, you're considering the possibility of having several migration at the same time from the same site, while in the original one, we were doing that sequentially. And I don't understand why doing it in parallel will decrease the time, in fact. Because here we just have one bottleneck per site.
But the first okay, so the first migration, so for the path of that the migration passes, so the virtual machine first passes from the link from the local data center network that's limited by 1 gigabit. But when it reaches this link that has 10 gigabits, do not use the 10 gigabits. It's limited to the 1 gigabit. So for example, here we could perform other migrations that could be passed to the other data centers if they had more renewable energy available. And this could happen in parallel without being a bottleneck for this link that has a higher capacity.
Okay, and so that, I think I got it. So I don't understand why there is congestions on these links for the Nemesis part on the animated images that you show in this case. Because if we are doing it sequentially, then there cannot be congestion on these links.
Yeah, but many links are shared by many data centers. So it's
from the animated view, there were congestion on this link, which is a 10 gigabit outside link from a given site. I don't remember which slide it was.
Animation.
Yeah, the animation, yeah. Yes, this one.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, and there is congestion.
Yeah.
There is
So
congestion.
sometimes they happen inside the same data center only.
Right.
It's because all the consolidation start at once, so they compete for the network. All the migrations for performing the server consolidation, and this also can impact the migrations that are going out to the data centers.
So maybe I don't understand what you mean by congestion here.
Okay, it's if the migration was 10% longer than the perfect scenario. This perfect scenario would be only the migration is executed. It has fully access to the network. No other migration was competing for the network.
But yeah, as we are doing sequential migration in Nemesis algorithm, we are not competing for the network. So that's why I don't understand why there is congestion.
Yeah, it depends. For example, when the migrations are inside the same data center for the server consolidation, they were not sequentially. They started at once. And for the different data centers, there's the chance that a migration from other data center is planned, and it affects the same network links. And the migration from the server consolidation can also affect the network that is to be used for planning the migration between different data centers.
Okay. Okay, so I also have a question. It was on slide 29, so that's the second contribution. And it's on the equation, and I didn't, no, it's a previous one. Yes, thank you. So that's the first equation, and I didn't get it when I was reading the manuscript as well. So here you are showing the entire data center power consumption in equation 1, is it right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the workload, it is expressed in flops. In what is the metric for the workload?
The number of cores. So it's the number of cores required to execute the workloads. Number of CPU cores.
For the entire data center, you mean all the tasks?
It's really, yeah. For all the tasks, for example, the W is how many CPU cores were allocated to execute all the tasks at that data center at the instant K.
So behind this, there are several assumptions which are hidden. For instance, you are assuming that it's using fully all the cores.
Yeah.
Okay, and also it's assuming that either jobs have only one core, or if they are using cores on different nodes, it doesn't matter.
Here, yes, and also we are simulating homogeneous servers.
Yes, but for instance, imagine you have tasks with 4 cores, and you have servers with 3 or with 6 cores. So you don't account for the waste that you have when you are doing regular scheduling of virtual machines, for instance.
Yeah, no, so it's a more high-level scheduling.
Okay.
So
Okay, I got it now. So in chapter 5, I think you didn't mention it in the presentation, but I was wondering, how do you take into account the full life cycle, for instance, of the servers? And what I mean is, for instance, usually when you are doing a full life cycle analysis, and when you are using data with usage, you are using an amortization cost function where you put the manufacturing cost over the whole life of the server. And here in your manuscript, I didn't see that. So I don't know how you spread the cost of the manufacturing, well, in terms of CO2, over the lifetime of the servers, and what is the lifetime that you are considering here?
okay, so we assumed it was for example, 4 years of lifetime.
Okay.
And the CO2 is emitted, is accounted for these 4 years. So
Okay.
after the 4
You
years,
assume constant amortization. That's a model you are using.
for example, if you replace the server in the second year, you would pay for this manufacturing. Because you didn't use the server the 4 years.
So in this case, your amortization is on 2 years instead of 4 years.
No, it's considered 4 years. So each year it remits like 1/4 of the.
But if you are using the server for 2 years, then you don't account for half of the manufacturing cost?
You account, yeah. So you have the first, the manufacturing, the emissions considered for the first year.
Yes.
So 1/4. But if you remove the server in the second year, you will still pay the 3/4.
Okay, even if the server is not here anymore.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
Sure.
Okay.
Quite
So,
like the servers.
okay. So that's quite unusual. Usually, when you are doing such a life cycle account, you are doing either by flow, so you pay the full cost when you buy it, or you are doing it for the whole life, and then you report depending on the lifetime that you are considering. So okay, I got it now.
Just to explain, it's because, for example, for the grid solution, we simulate year by year. So if you consider for the manufacturing the whole cost, maybe it would be too expensive for just 1 year to buy the server. So the solution would not consider buying the servers. But when it's solved for the optimal solution, the manufacturing is considered at once because it observes more than the duration of the lifetime of the server.
Yeah, so that's a problem of amortization cost. And that's why the other in the literature, they are considering, usually the conclusion they have is that you have to keep the server the longest. And that's using this kind of amortization model where you amortize servers which are not here anymore. You kind of trick the model to have an optimal which is changing the servers more often. So that was the part I didn't got. So I'd like to come back to the assumption that you made in the second contribution. So I think it was in slide 27. Yes. So you are assuming the batch tasks, they can be executed in any of the data center. And so your data center are spread all over the world. And in the introduction, you said that usually these data centers are geographically distributed in order to reduce the latency with the user. So if you move the jobs, for instance, if you put the jobs further away from the users, so it implies, for instance, to use more the networks, so the global networks, and so it can be a bottleneck. But also, as we were saying, it's difficult to migrate the users of the data of the users. Sorry. And that can be also a bottleneck. So I was wondering which kind of application, in fact, are considered in this batch task. And do you have any idea on what is the proportion of such tasks in real clouds?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of clouds, they have like this workload of type services that, for example, could not be migrated because of the restrictions of response time. But in terms of batch is yet a relevant part of the workload. I think I put I don't remember exactly by head the value, but I think I put in my thesis example number.
So, for instance, if we consider an application which is largely used on a cloud data center, which is streaming, you cannot, in fact, move the streaming jobs all over the globe because otherwise the network flows will be too huge.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you have ideas of application that can follow this kind of constraints that you put in assumption?
Yeah, it would be more for example, batch tasks for processing things offline. But if you wanted to model the migrations, one possibility was to limit the data centers, like that it could be modeled. So the work would be like a workload that could be accepted only by a few number of data centers. So in that way, you could kind of model in high level the possibility to migrate the jobs.
Okay, and I have a question also. It was on slide 33. It was about the batteries, in fact, and I was not sure. Did you consider the manufacturing of the batteries?
Yeah, here in the first was only for the manufacturing of the batteries, was considered 59 kilograms per kilowatt hour for the 10 years, but since we are simulating 1 year, it was 5.9 kilograms per kilowatt hour.
Okay, you took one tenth of the and so considering a lifetime of 10 years, it's not negligible for a battery. Probably the capacity of the battery is going to degrade during well, it's not probably, it will degrade in the 10 years in a consequent manner. So that, do you consider increasing the size of the battery because of aging? It will lower the capacity of the batteries.
Yeah, here we didn't model the degradation of the years. But yeah, it could be one outcome of, if you consider the degradation, it could be a oversize of the battery.
Okay, so
for example, this could be compensated by, because the battery is expensive, like in terms of CO2, maybe this would be offset by using the power of the grid as backup if the grid is not that high carbon intensive.
Okay, so I also have a question on slide 38. So that's where you're considering the manufacturing cost of the server. And so instead of using the Dell, I guess 4000 is from Dell, instead of using the Dell methodology, you use the one from the ACT paper.
Yeah.
And well, the difference is huge. And do you know where this difference comes from and why did you use this?
Here it's because it considers the specific technology of the hardware. So for example, here for the run, the LCA CO2 is the one reported by Dell, because it used like this technology. But in reality, it was here, is a DDR4 in the run. So for example, here, the LCA analysis reported the 500 kilograms, because it's considered that the server had this DDR3 RAM model, but in reality it has this DDR4. And the CO2 of using this DDR4 is way smaller, and in reality it has like 64 kilograms only for the RAM. And this is also valid for the other components of the server.
Yeah, I read the paper, so I think that's one of the answer, but the other part of it is that usually when you're a manufacturer, you are considering a more macro approach, let's say a top-down approach, while in this case, it's more a micro approach where you use each component and so on. And so I was wondering also, maybe they do not account for the scope 3 emissions that you would have to take into account for having the whole manufacturing cost. Because for instance, for a given component here, obviously when you're at Dell, you have several manufacturers. You don't have just one, and they are different costs and so on. So I was wondering, maybe the right answer, I don't know, is in between these two figures and considering one instead of the other ones. As you notice, it's a big difference. It's quite confusing, well, to compare with other results from the literature. So I was wondering why, in fact, you choose the ACT comparison instead of the usual LCA provided by Dell. And would it change your results to consider the other one?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I chose this because it was a more updated value, because it also evaluates using the real hardware characteristic of the server, but the CO2 is an input for the modeling. So using here also it's a estimative of the footprint of the server. The CO2 and the CO2 is an input for the modeling. If you have the correct CO2, it can be used in our modeling. So I use it from the ACT because it was a value more up to date, like consider the real characteristic of the servers.
I understand your point, but yeah, this slides of 40 and 41, these results, they highly depend on this, in fact, yeah. Because you have if you are taking the LCA value from Dell, I'm quite sure you don't have these results.
Yes.
Okay, we agree.
Here the model is used for comparison of possible scenarios, so you can use many configuration of servers. But yeah, we need to take care of which input we provide to the model.
Sure. So I have a last question, which is more about the perspectives. So in your manuscript, it was in page 84, you say it's important, it's an important aspect to consider that the demand for cloud computing resources grows year by year. So that's the assumption you took here. And do you think it is desirable, such a growth? Because in fact, we consider 25% growth, which is huge. And should we, in fact, contribute to make this happen? Or can we reduce really the energy consumption of cloud infrastructure, which is a aim that we have in particular in the Paris Agreement, while sustaining such a growth of cloud infrastructure?
Okay, so this increase was forecasted by Cisco.
Sure, I'm not questioning this. I want your opinion. Is it desirable?
It's hard to impede the usage of cloud computing platforms. Very present in our society provides many of the applications and services. So it's like a fundamental aspect. By this we are trying to reduce the environmental impact of using it because it's important to our society. But there's also the question of which application is really important to execute, which computation is really important to execute. Because nowadays a big amount of traffic and computation is used, for example, for video streaming, as you said in one of your questions. So it's also hard to, how do you educate your user to make him understand that watching like some videos would be hard to cause environmental harm to the environment. So maybe we need like a collaboration also with social sciences to see how do we educate the users of these environmental aspects to see how to modify his usage. And other point is that here, as we are optimizing trying to reduce the environmental impact, you can also like have a type of rebound effect. So more users see, now it has a lower environmental impact, so you use more this cloud platform, and then the environmental impact will increase over time. So yeah, it's hard to see how to educate the users to motivate to avoid how to educate to see which computation is really important to execute. So for me, it's still an open research question. See how we could incorporate this type of decision to our problem.
Okay, thank you. But we are still doing video streaming. right?
Yeah,
Don't.
it's hard. Yeah.
So thank you. That was my last question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you had many questions, but still I have one or two more questions.
Okay.
Maybe we turn back. We can stay here. So of course, I'd like to return to 37 slide, the slide that was, yeah, this one. So what I imagine is a yellow and a violet point correspond to the extreme points of a Pareto front. And we can imagine the Pareto front inside, it means the non-dominated points. Maybe you don't know this. Okay. No. And I was wondering what was the form in between of your 2 points. For instance, you have WT battery and grid on the top and the one corresponding to the one on the bottom. You have those 2 points which are discussing one with the other. And if I had to imagine points in between from this curve.
Okay, so for example here, these 2 points, so
2 points, one yellow and one violet, which go together. For instance, I was taking the yellow point on the bottom, on the top, I'm sorry. WT plus battery plus grid. And it's corresponding to another point on the bottom on the left, on the right. You see that? Maybe I can show you. You see the 2 points.
Yeah.
And we can imagine that there is a sort of curve between those 2 points. If we say, okay, something in between where I balance the cost and the CO2. No, you didn't investigate this point.
Yeah. So,
okay.
And just to explain why the WT performed the worst, because for the selected locations, it's like in the center of the cities, so there's no too much wind, so you need a big number of wind turbines. So that's why you increase the cost and increase the emissions.
Okay, it's okay. I had another question. I appreciate that you use a linear program because I love linear programming. Yes, and I teach it also. And so you use linear programming to size your data center. And then, as far as I understood, you want to decide how to improve your energy sources using simulation or scenarios. And I was wondering whether it would be interesting to use the dual variables of your program. Do they have information inside or not? Did you have a look to that or not?
We didn't investigate it.
You didn't investigate. Maybe it could be interesting. Maybe my last question. Imagine that I am an engineer from Google or Microsoft,
yes.
And I come and I want to use something from your thesis. What would I use?
It depends of the problem you want to solve.
Yeah, but what is the result you want to sell me now? Okay, I have $1 million to.
Yeah, maybe the sizing of the renewable infrastructure over the different years. Because we know that they want to reduce the carbon footprint. And this is an approach that can help them to execute many scenarios to evaluate how to.
So this is the thing which is the most interesting.
Because it's like the interest right now is to reduce their carbon footprint. So.
And moreover, it's a linear program, so it's fantastic. Thank you. So maybe I will stop with the question. Thank you, and turn to your supervisors for questions or comments. Daniel, I let you start.
Yes, I will go here so that Jerry can see me. But I bring my laptop because I had a few things noted to say. Maybe they are looking, they are seeing me.
Yeah, maybe return to the other one. So can we see both?
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to thank the jury, Patricia, Julita, and Cecile, Lucia, and Nadia for taking the time to review Miguel's work, and I thank you for your interesting comments and insights about the work. It will help a lot of for us to continue working on this. And of course, I want to thank Miguel for all his hard work over the last few years. So we started working together in July 2017. Do you remember that, Miguel? In the distance pre-COVID area that people don't remember anymore. But he wrote me an email asking for opportunities to work on an undergraduate research project on distributed systems, and we have always working together ever since. And since 2017, so from the beginning, I have seen this vocation to be a scientist in Miguel, right? And I think this is very interesting. Miguel is really a deep thinker. He's curious and is not happy when receiving superficial explanations. So he always asks more and more and more, and I think this is a good thing. And he's very open to new ideas, but he has strong opinions about what he thinks the research direction should be. So I think this shows his autonomy. He's autonomous. He's always bringing new ideas. He brings new analysis before we even ask. A collaborator of ours once told me that during our meetings, he frequently proposed some new ideas, new analysis that Miguel already did and showed the results right away. So this is very interesting. It's a characteristic of Miguel that I appreciate very much. So whatever the jury deliberates right now, I'm very happy with all your work, and I thank you for this opportunity to work with you during all these years. And just to finalize, I would like to thank Fanido Fossé and the entire lab for taking such good care of Miguel during his time here, and for this fantastic opportunity to work on such exciting research projects. I learned a lot from you, so I thank you very much.
Thank you. And Fanny now. So, I'm not as well organized as Daniel, so I've not something written. So I just to thank you for being present for this PhD defense, and thank you for the reviewer. Thank you to Daniel to introduce Miguel. So as he said, we take care of him when he arrived in France. The first week he got the COVID. A few months later he was in lockdown. But for the next time we were better. Yeah. He was away to stay in France during wave of COVID in Brazil and go back to Brazil before wave of COVID in France. We try to do our best. So yes, at the beginning of the thesis, when we have new ideas during meetings, we see Miguel looking far away, moving his hands, and we are wondering if always he was coding. So he go back to us and say yes. And at the end, he just show us the result. It was already done. Okay. It was more and more scary. So finally, he's already knew how to write a paper at the beginning of the thesis. For PhD students, it's very impressive. His only default maybe is too much talkative. So to be honest, it's not an original joke. My own advisor did the same joke about me at my own PhD defense. So don't worry, it will be better. So thank you.
Thank you. So I have to turn to the public now. Those who have a PhD in science, the one who has a PhD, if they want to ask questions. No, it's okay. So the jury is going to deliberate.